Greenlightnetwork presents Football Time.
Hey, and welcome to the Football Time Show. We're here for NFL Week 14, and with us, as always, is our man Achilles Reign, ready to break down this week's NFL games and get into some of our best bets. A pretty small slate. For some reason, the NFL decided to put 6 buys this week. A week before fantasy playoffs and a week after. They had 2 buys. Why they didn't go 4 and 4, no one knows, but that's the NFL for you. They don't really care. They just do whatever they want. So 6 buys this week, and a sandwiched in with a terrible Thursday night and Monday night game to sort of pull the weekend together. But what do you look at this week? Are you excited to get into these games, or are you a little... I think we both liked last week's games. I'm a little pulled back on this one. Don't like as much this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, other than a couple of games there where I feel like there's a possibility for a lot of good prop bets, there's not a whole lot that I like this week, but I was able to come up with at least 1 or 2 here for most of the games.
Yeah, so let's get into it, and let's sort of kick it off in a game where there is nothing I like, and anyone who can claim to have an edge in this one, I want to hear how you have that edge. But the Jacksonville Jaguars go to the Tennessee Titans here. The obligatory Tennessee Titans -3, basically because they're at home. Honestly, I have nothing in this game, and I don't really know what to expect in this game. You have Tennessee, who randomly fired their GM midway through the year. I don't know how that affects anything one way or the other. Usually that's sort of an end-of-the-year thing. Jacksonville, who possibly threw up the worst road performance I have ever seen last week versus the Detroit Lions. And, I can give the Lions plenty of plaudits on offense, but there has to be something wrong if you can't score points on the Detroit Lions. So, Jags, Titans. I got nothing in this game. There's not even any prop bets, I could really put together in this game. So what are you looking at here to sort of pull us out of the fire? Give me your education on Titans, Jags here.
Well, listen, first of all, I had to dig deep in this one here. I do kind of expect the Titans to win, especially if they play the way they've played over the last couple of weeks. We've seen them have a few hiccups here and there, but overall, it still seemed like they're the top team in that division. But even with all that being said, I wouldn't be shocked if somehow Jacksonville managed to pull off a win in this one. But with all that being said, I was able to find a few. I had to dig deep, but I'll give you my place here, okay? I got Etienne anytime touchdown at +135. Now, I know that Tennessee doesn't give up a lot of yards on the ground, but 2 of the last 3 games, they've given up a rushing touchdown, and we know that Etienne has the ability to be very explosive. So I feel like he's got a good opportunity here to get a touchdown in this one. As always, it seems like it's something that I play every single week, and it's paid off for the most part here. I'm going to ride Henry here on an anytime touchdown. He's at -175, so not great value there, but it's because he's been pretty consistent throughout the year. And my last play here, I've got Tennessee second half spread at -1.5. I felt a little weird taking a 3-point spread for the game. I feel that if Jacksonville's going to compete at all in this game, they might come out fast and early on. But being at home, Tennessee might kind of slow things down towards the end and kind of wear them down with that ground and pound offense they like to run. And that's why I took the second half as opposed to the full game bet.
Yeah, a couple things in this one that sort of made me pull back. Basically, the Titans' offense the last 3 weeks has been even below par for what you expect for the Titans. And there's nothing I could trust. Henry has been poor. It's sort of been the reverse of what we've gotten from Derrick Henry. He started off running for 100-yard games, and then he's sort of slowed down here. You have on the Jag side, Lawrence, I believe is going to be a go, but he's banged up. So, I don't want to mess with that. And if he's not 100% healthy, and then we get a backup for the Jags here, and then you mentioned ATN, yes, explosive, but I think everything started off bad for the Jags when ATN hit that explosive run, and then did what he's had trouble doing, which is holding on to the football and fumbling the football, which sort of got the Jags off to that bad start. But yeah, I'm just a no-go in this one. I assume the Titans will win it because they've been able to sort of beat these teams. But, if you ask me, if both teams are hitting on their best, I think the Jags are probably the better team at their best. The problem is they don't seem to sustain their best for one full game. It's possibly like a quarter, maybe you get a half, but it never seems to be a full game. And if you do that versus the Titans usually find a way to win the football game there.
Yeah, I agree with you.
All right, so let's move on to let's just say the weirdest line of the bunch. It's not even weird. It's more old school football versus the football nerds here. The Minnesota Vikings, the 10-win Minnesota Vikings, go to the 5-win Detroit Lions. So who would you expect to be favored in this? It's the Detroit Lions, and it's the Detroit Lions, and it opened at 1 and is now at a steady 2.5 here. I got a couple plays here, but I feel like old school football Achilles Reign versus sort of numbers cruncher Champ Chesterfield will be competing in this one. I wrote this one down figuring we'd be on opposite ends of this one. So what are you looking at here versus the Vikings Lions in this one?
This is one of the few games that I was actually excited about. It feels weird to say that I'm excited about a NFC North division game, but listen, the Lions have picked up their play over the last couple of weeks, and I know the defense isn't really stellar, but you saw what they did to Jacksonville, and you mentioned it. A lot of it had to do with that fumble from Etienne, but overall they've played better. They're still not good, but they've played better. But the offense seems to kind of be clicking. They seem to have gotten at least a little bit more balance with their pass and run game. The big concern for me is the Swift in and out with injuries. I don't know, that kind of gives me a little bit of a pause here, but I was a little shocked when I saw this spread. I think I looked at it a couple of days ago, and I think I jumped on a Minnesota money line bet here. But I've got a couple plays in that game, and then I've got some same game parlays for later on also.
Yeah, I looked at it. I raised an eyebrow, I will say. But, you start delving deep into the numbers, and it's just basically all bad for Minnesota. They've been in 9 one-score games. If they lost every one of those one-score games, their record would be 11-1 or 1-11 this year. That's basically their losses. They've been killed in, and every other game somehow they've managed to win the one-score games. Last week's game, no different. Played all right to start. Let the Jets hang around. Jets come back, are sitting on a 1st and goal from the 2. Somehow don't get in. And then, Vikings win. It's basically been that all year long for the Vikings. DVOA, which I look at a lot because I think it's probably the best sort of measure of teams, marks this Vikings team down as the worst 10-win team of all time by a very, very wide margin. And what gets better, if you bumped them down to just a 9-win team, they would be the worst 9-win team of all time by a wide margin here. They have the worst point differential that a 10-win team has ever had in the history of football. So, you play to win the game. They have wins. I think we all sort of respect that, but I think we all have eyes too and watch this football team play, and it's like, this football team is not very good. So I'm going to ride the Lions here. I wish I would have gotten it at the 1 and not the 2.5 that I got it at. Honestly, I did not think this thing would be bet up, but they keep raising it up. So Lions minus 2.5 For me, I have an over on Minnesota Vikings, Detroit Lions, 51.5. I do think this game will be played at a very high-scoring pace. The only thing I worry about it a little is you mentioned that first game the two played to a 3.1 score game that the Lions should have won, but the Vikings won. But they did shut down Jordan Jefferson a little bit there with a nice defensive run, and their pass rush has come along. So maybe the Vikings don't score as much, but I think this one will be a high-scoring one. I go with the over 51.5, and then I'm going to take a long shot. I'm going to take the total bans on points here. Detroit Lions total ban points 41-50 is 11-1. Minnesota Vikings 41-50 is 14-1. So I'm going to put a little on that, see if I can hit a long shot and see if one of these teams can sort of get up there in the 41-50 point range in this one. What are you looking at in this one?
Well, I got a couple of plays here. Now, as you mentioned, I do think that this game probably has the potential to be probably one of the higher scoring events of this Sunday. And if it does play out that way, then there's a really good chance for some prop opportunities here. So I'll give you my plays, my straight plays for this game so far. I've got Minnesota plus 2.5 here at minus 110. I also, like I mentioned earlier, managed to squeeze in the money line. I think that even though the Vikings have been, as you mentioned, probably one of the worst 10, 11 win teams in NFL history, I still think that they're managing to get those wins, which is really important. I don't think we expected different from the Vikings. Not that we thought they'd win this many games, but we thought they'd be in a lot of really close games that they would possibly lose because this is what the Vikings do. But, they're winning. That's what's important. So I got the Vikings money line also at plus 112. I've got a revenge touchdown. This is just for fun. I wouldn't suggest it to anybody. But if it does become a high-scoring event, then there's a good chance this one hits also. I got Hawkinson anytime touchdown at plus 160. And I'll get my same game parlays for this game later on.
Yeah, I had a couple guys I looked at for anytime touchdown. I wanted to parlay, Ross St. Brown and Jamal Williams, but that didn't pay out all that great. It was almost like an even, two-team parlay, which I didn't think there was great value in. Jefferson, like I said, did not play well in this game, but they didn't adjust his odds at any point, so I didn't think that was all that great. The only one I did see was Hawkinson. But since, Detroit's gotten, its receivers healthy and back, he's sort of fallen back a little bit. So I think this game could be a shootout, but I'm always interested to see what the Vikings do to sort of mess that up. And I'm always curious when you take the Vikings, because that usually means Mr. Kirk's going to have one of his games finally. But like you said, I don't think the Vikings are a terrible team, but it's just they've hit one of those streaks where every close game they've won. I think they're sort of are the team that we sort of expected, 7, 8, 9 win team. It's just happened that they've won all their close games. So it becomes probably a 12, 13, needless to say, 14 possibly win team. It also, sort of helps that they're in a division of no hope where possibly the second best team is this Detroit Lions team. I don't think there was any way to totally predict Green Bay completely falling off a cliff. And I think we all knew the Bears were going to be pretty poor. So it's sort of just a worlds colliding where everything's sort of broken right here for the Vikings as well.
Well, listen, since my Rams played on Thursday Night Football, I think this is probably going to be one of the more entertaining games to watch in this first slate of games for the early morning games. But, listen, I think that if this Vikings team were to play this season over 100 times, I don't think that anyone would be shocked to say that 50% of the time they'd probably have a losing record. Yeah. That's just how tight things have been. But overall, I think this game has a lot of potential to have a lot of good prop bets in it.
Yeah, playing into that, the Lions might need to lose since they might not be getting the Rams' first pick in the draft now that they stole a game up there, and the Texans now have separation.
Yeah, it sure seems that way.
All right, let's go Cleveland Browns, Cincinnati Bengals. I think I'm going to surprise you with this one.
I hope so.
So you probably got the hottest team in football right now in the Cincinnati Bengals, maybe the Dallas Cowboys, but they played a pretty soft schedule here. But Bengals coming off a handful of good wins here. Cleveland, I probably should have looked this up, but I can't imagine too many teams cover double-digit point spreads without scoring an offensive touchdown. But somehow the Cleveland Browns managed to do that. I read that game perfectly right, that Deshaun Watson would be awful. Made some money on that, but Cleveland still rolled away with it. So what do you make of Cleveland Browns Cincinnati Bengals here at -5?
Hey, listen, obviously Cincinnati has been playing a lot better. I mean, last week versus Kansas City was that they played. They showed up, and it shocked me a little bit because even though Vegas had them as the favorite, I still thought Kansas City would come out and kind of spread the ball around and make it a little harder for Cincinnati. But Cincinnati's playing good, and there's no denying that. Joe Burrow has not lost to Kansas City, but I believe he also hasn't beat Cleveland in his career so far. So this would be
found the stat where I.
This would be probably the first time if he manages to pull this one off. I looked at a few prop bets and I didn't see too much value there. Maybe because of the sports book I was looking at. I was kind of on a last minute crunch because of some traveling. But I've got literally first half Cincinnati -3.5 at +100 here. I think that if Cincinnati's going to win this game, they're going to come out fast and strong, especially at home. So that's the only bet I could find for this one that I really liked, especially at plus money. So I was kind of hoping that I could probably steal a few off of you.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ride the Cleveland Browns here. I don't know why, but Cincinnati has had really, really difficult times with this Cleveland Browns team. I'm not expecting, a better performance from Deshaun Watson. Maybe a little bit better, but I think he'll probably be bad, basically the rest of the year. But I don't think that changes much because Cleveland hasn't had a good quarterback. I don't know, Otto Graham, probably Bernie Kosar. But it's just, there's a weird thing where Cleveland has owned them. I think they'll be able to run on Cincinnati, though Cincinnati's defense has been improved. You got the other side of it where Cleveland's defense has been terrible all year long. Granted, other than the game last week where they scored 4 touchdowns. But that was also graded on a curve because it was the Houston Texans playing Kyle Wright at quarterback, who will no longer be playing quarterback for the Houston Texans. We're back to the Davis Mills experiment here, but nonetheless, I think the Bengals will be able to run on them. I got a parlay later in the show that I'll break down in this game, but only thing I got in this one, you mentioned at prop bets, I thought all the receiver stats on the Cincinnati side were a little too high. Higgins and Jamar Chase were a little bloated, I thought. Same with Mixon and Chubb. Basically is the only offensive being in this Cleveland Browns system, and you can't basically take anything on that side of things unless you're going to go after an under, which is really hard to talk yourself into with Nick Chubb going under. And that's sort of where I sat on that. But I'm just going straight bet Cleveland Browns plus the 5 in this one. I know it's crazy, and I don't take Cleveland a whole lot. But I'm going to ride just the weird streak that Cincinnati has struggled here. And maybe Kevin Stefanski just has something on these Cincinnati Bengals.
So the Joe Burrow hate continues.
The Joe Burrow hate continues. Though I didn't take the Chiefs last week.
I did.
All right, let's go to this one. I didn't have a ton in this just because basically I couldn't get a read on the Giants the last game versus Washington. Philly blew out Tennessee, looked really good doing so, but once Tennessee lost Burks, basically any thought of Tennessee being able to throw the football was lost. Philly goes on the road, 7.5-point favorites. I thought Giants fighting for their lives. I thought 7.5 was a little much in a division game, but I think of the NFC East teams that I think will sort of fall off. I thought the Giants will be the one to do so. I haven't liked the way Saquon's looked, the last couple weeks. they literally have no receiver that basically anyone has ever heard of. I don't know if I've ever seen in fantasy football where literally you can get their whole receiver room off the free agent pile here. But what do you make of this Eagles-Giants game? I'm curious what you went with here, or you just passed on this one too because the spread was so high.
Well, this New York Giants defense has been pretty stingy. Even when you look back at that Dallas game that they got blown out in, that first half was really close. And they've been in just about every single game they played in the season, even the ones that they've lost. Their biggest issue has been their passing attack is pretty much non-existent. It's all based off whether Saquon's run the ball well or not. That opens things up for those other guys on the outside.
That was, Daniel's run the ball well too. That's basically been their offense.
He has. The issue is if they don't do that, if Saquon doesn't run the ball well, if Jones doesn't scramble well and get out of the pocket to avoid pressure, then they're not really getting much in terms of passing attack here. So it gives me a little bit of pause. And I will say I was able to come up with a few picks for this game, but I will give a disclaimer. I was watching the pregame show, and it looks like the weather's starting to turn over there in New York. Yeah. So that now gives me a little bit of concern for these picks here. I'm still going to ride them because I felt good about them. But disclaimer for those of you who want to tail on these. My place for this one, I got A.J. Brown, anytime touchdown plus 118. You've seen what he's done so far since he's joined that team. He's been pretty much, everything stellar that we expected from him. The combination between him and Hurts has been really good. I've got Devontae Smith, another guy who's really played well over the last couple of weeks, anytime touchdown plus 155. I've got Jalen Hurts over 48.5 rushing yards at minus 123. Last week was one of the lowest carry / yardage rushing attack for Jalen Hurts. But if you go back and you look at his numbers, they've all been really good. So I expect him to run the ball well in this one, especially if the weather starts to turn. And my last one here, Miles Sanders over 1.5 receptions at plus 146. He's not a huge part of the passing attack, but he does have 6 catches over the last 4 weeks. And I feel that with the weather turning, it might be a more of a short dump off type of situation here. 1.5 receptions. Not crazy to think about. He can pull off with 2 here, and that's all you need to pull off. Yardage does not matter. So getting plus money on that, I thought was pretty good value.
Yeah, I didn't go anything game. I got one prop. I got Daniel Jones anytime touchdown at plus 245. I thought that was pretty good value, especially since we saw Daniel Jones run the ball a little bit more last week. I look for him to run the ball a little bit more. Glad you mentioned the Giants defense. I thought Kayvon Thibodeaux the last couple weeks has looked like a monster. This will be an interesting matchup because the Eagles probably have the best offensive line in the game right now. They've been mauling people. You saw it last week. The Titans dared him to throw. They gave Hurts a beautiful pocket, and he picked them apart. The week before that, they just mashed everybody at the line, rushed for 340-plus yards. They can sort of mold themselves, we talked about it last week, into what they want, and the offensive line allows them to do that. If they want to pass, they can pass block, give Hurts time. If they want to run, they can maul you up front and give Sanders and Hurts and a couple of those other guys holes. So I'm curious to see if the Giants can sort of stick around here, and then next Christmas coming up, you got that big game with Dallas and Philadelphia, which sort of will be big, and then next week you got Giants Washington rematch, which I think will be really, really big. I think I don't think this one is necessarily loser leaves town, but I think next week Washington Giants. Loser of that probably loses their spot out of the playoffs, unless, of course, they tie again. But we won't go into both seemingly playing for the tie in overtime last week. But, with the way it looks, it might be one of those where one team has 7 losses and these two teams now have 6 losses. And they get that spot in the playoffs. So I can't necessarily fault it. It's not a whole lot of fun to watch the last 4 minutes as both those teams are basically just running the clock out. But nonetheless, anytime touchdown for me, plus 245 on this one. This one's, I think everybody's a little bit split on. I'm curious what your take is. I looked at the weather yesterday. I probably should have looked again today because, I think that's important for this one. I think if the weather's all right, I looked, it was going to be, 30 degrees, like 12-mile-per-hour winds. But if that starts to get up, I don't trust this pick quite as much. But the Jets go into the Bills. Bills 9.5-point favorites. It's hard to say they haven't looked great the last handful of weeks because I think they're like 4-1. So that it's a little hard to be like, oh, you haven't looked good. You've lost one game out of 4. One of them was this Jets game where Josh Allen sort of sustained that injury. I thought he looked pretty good last week, so maybe that's starting to heal up a little bit. We talked a little bit about the Jets and Minnesota, how they probably should have won that game, didn't make that goal line stand. What are your thoughts on this one, Jets at Bills here?
Listen, they played each other once already, and you mentioned it was a really tough matchup. And I expect a lot of the same. That Jets defense has been pretty stout pretty much all season long, which is one of the reasons why they've been as successful as they have been, especially with the fact they've had pretty much one quarterback in, one quarterback out. And they're not getting a huge, crazy amount of production out of their offensive unit. They're getting enough to get those wins, but it's nothing spectacular when you really look and dive into the numbers here. But I expect this game to be somewhat close. I do think Buffalo's getting better. I think that, as you mentioned, it seems like Allen's starting to get healthy again. And if that's the case, then I expect the Bills to at least come out strong in this one, especially with the implications that it has on the division here. So I'll give you my plays for this game. I got Buffalo here, first half -6. I wasn't too crazy about that line, especially the way that Buffalo has given up games towards the second half of games, which is the reason why I'm riding them with that first half at home. Then I've got Stephon Diggs anytime touchdown at +101. I know the Jets don't give up a lot of passing touchdowns, but I feel that if this Buffalo team is going to win, they're going to have to force something downfield to open things up for the running attack. So that's my thinking for that one. Then I've got my last one here. I got White over 3.5 rushing yards at -103. I know that the Jets don't really run the ball. They're not known as a team that runs the ball, but they got young athletic quarterbacks. And if you look at the last few games, they gave themselves enough quarterback attempts to be able to get those 4 yards. So I thought that was a pretty safe bet, especially with, only -103. I thought you had some pretty good odds there.
Yeah, I got 3, plus I got my favorite Bills parlay that hasn't hit yet. We'll see if we can get it by the end of the year. But I'm going to go with the Bills -9.5. I'm feeling a Bills blowout here where we can get a 31-10 type game. Maybe they put them on. They haven't been home. That's the other thing they haven't been home in like 4 weeks here because that game got moved to Detroit. And then they played Detroit. So they've basically been on the road here for 4 straight weeks. Finally back home. Home game here versus the Jets. A little bit of revenge. The Bills need to keep winning to stay out in front of that 1 seed. I think it's really, really important for this team to get that bye, because I do think health is becoming a little bit of an issue for this Buffalo Bills team. You saw, I think we all figured Von Miller was going to be gone for the year. They were using, a very vague language when he got hurt, but, it was official last week when they sort of operated on him and found the ACL tear. So I think that bye week's important for them to heal up and just have 2 games to try to get to the Super Bowl here. So Bills -9.5 for me. The Jets' pass defense has been really, really good this year, but you can get to them on the ground because they're so aggressive in the pass rush and on, their corner defense. So I got Josh Allen 50-plus yards at +175. He ran for about 70 yards on him in that last game. I look for him to really, really sort of use him in this game with the run. Same with that. I'm going Josh Allen 2+ touchdowns was 10-1. So 50+ rushing yards +175 for this one. Josh Allen 2+ touchdowns 10-1. I'd also look at the Singletary 50 plus rushing yards. It was, it was about 1 plus 135. And they started to use Cook last week versus New England. Maybe he gets a play. So if you can get 30 or 40, plus rushing yards there at pretty good value, I'd look at that one as well. But because I don't know what the breakdown of the carries is going to be between Allen, Singletary, and Cook, I'm going with the one who I know will take the snap every time. And that's Josh Allen. So Josh Allen, 50 plus 175, 2+ touchdowns, 10-1 for me on that one. Plus the Bills minus 9.5 on this one. I think this one's going to be a Bills blowout. I will say our man Frankie thinks the Jets by 4. So he might have a vested interest on the other side of this one.
I think he does. I'm not sure quite, how much of a fan he is, seeing as how he's got his entire man cave painted green and white. So I don't know how much I'm going to take that into account.
He was also looking for takers to take the Mets not winning 100+ games in baseball this year. So
I might have to have a conversation with them later on.
All right, let's move to this one, and I can pretty much tell you this one's a 0 for me. Houston Texans at the Dallas Cowboys, 17-point Dallas Cowboys win. I'm just not touching this one. Not player props because I didn't like any of those. I know Mills is going to be back, but I think, I just think Texans aren't going to try. You saw Dallas roll up the score last week. I don't know if that necessarily means they're going to roll up the score this week. And the bookies sort of did what they were supposed to do. They made this number scary enough where I'm not taking either side. So I'm just a no-go in this one. I think Dallas cruises. I know some TV has tried to make it like a rivalry game. Texans, one, have to be around for more than, 20 years, and have to be better than a first-round playoff exit for a 4-year stretch before I think we get any sort of rivalry here. But anything in this one you love?
Yeah, I've got a couple here that I like, nothing that I really love. But, this Dallas team makes it really confusing, especially with the way they utilize both backs now as far as what you're going to get out of it. But I was able to find a few plays here. So I'm going to ride the second half spread here, Dallas minus 6.5. It's still kind of, big for a half spread, but this Houston team hasn't really shown the ability to stop anybody. So I think you're pretty safe there, especially the way this offense is played. You could take the first half if you'd like, if you think Dallas is going to come out slinging early on. I think they might kind of close it out towards that second half, which is what they've done over the last few weeks.
Like last week where Dallas just kept rolling up score and getting stats for everybody. I think that second half is a decent play.
Yeah, I mean, even you go back to that Thanksgiving game versus New York, and that's when they really, took off. It seems like they try to wear you down with their rushing attack early on in that game, and once they've got you where they want you, they really start slinging it. But I've got that, like I said, that second half spread, Dallas minus 6.5 at minus 115. I've got CeeDee Lamb anytime touchdown plus 100. You look at the numbers over the last couple of weeks, and he's been Dak's favorite target. He just seems to be catching things left and right. So going up against a bad Houston defense, I like his chances of being able to score a touchdown here, especially if Dallas runs up the score the way they have been. And my last one here, this is kind of a sub. You can go either way with this one. As I mentioned, they've been doing a really good job at splitting the carries with that backfield between Elliott and Pollard. So I'm going to write Elliott here over 64.5 rushing yards at minus 115. But I think I saw Pollard at the exact same thing. So I don't think you'd be too crazy to assume that either one of these guys can pull off there. They both hit in 2 of the last 3. They both covered the 64.5 yard spread in 2 of the last 3 meetings since Elliott came back from his injury. So potential for them to hit that, both of them, I think is pretty high.
Yeah. All right, nothing for me. Like I said, we'll move on to an interesting game here. Ravens go to the Steelers. Ravens got that last second wind there as Lamar Jackson got hurt. Tyler Huntley had to take over. Still managed to get the win, which I thought was really important. Steelers continued their really, really strong play versus the Falcons. We didn't get the Mariota bench in that game, but we got the Mariota bench after that game, and we'll get the Desmond Ridder experience, see how that rookie does, taking over here for the Falcons. 1.5 for the Steelers here. I'm on the Ravens on this one. I know I've been probably one of the proponent on the Steelers. I think I've taken them 3 straight weeks here. They've been on a really, really nice run, but I think last week you saw the Ravens offense struggle, but I think that's because Lamar was out then. Huntley gets thrown in there. We talked about Denver's defense actually still being pretty good, and they still played hard throughout the game. Well, we'll get into that game coming up, but the offense once again no-showed. But I think Huntley will be better this week with a week's worth of practice and reps, and know he's starting. We saw him play pretty well last year, so I'm all over the Ravens here. Our boy down at the gas station, Smokey Mark, really, really liked the Ravens this week. I'm with the Smokey Mark here. I'm going Ravens, plus the 2 points in this one. I think Huntley will have a good one, and I just, it's not scientific. I just don't think the Steelers team is capable of winning like 4 in a row. So I'm big on the Ravens on this one.
Listen, I wish I was as confident as good old Sparky is, but I'm not. I'm not as bold. I think that historically, this Baltimore Ravens and Pittsburgh Steelers matchup tends to be an old school style matchup where both of these defenses are really grinding. It seems like it's a rush versus attack, pass second, and it becomes old school football. I really like watching this matchup. I just don't have any confidence in it this week. I know that Huntley, is probably gotten a full week of reps now, so he's probably a little more familiar with what they're expecting. The game plan that they've put together for him is probably a lot closer to what suits his traits better than Lamar Jackson's. But even so, I'm still not sure which way to go. I'm a no play on this one. I couldn't really find anything that I really liked. I don't know which way it's going to lean. I don't know which way the game's going to go. So if anything, I'm probably just going to sit back and watch this game. Hopefully it provides some old school football. Yeah,
the other weird thing is this one is these two teams will play twice in the next 3 weeks. They play this week, they play somebody else the next week, and then they reverse and go back to Baltimore, the week after that, which is sort of a weird sort of thing, especially since I guess Baltimore's still in pretty solid position. They're winning that division, but, they're about a loss away from putting themselves in a bad position, especially if the Steelers can get a win. But if you're playing the Steelers again in 2 weeks and you're at home and Lamar might be healthy by then, you don't quite know what they're going to come out with. So this might be one of those where the home team just wins and then the home team just wins again. But I don't know. I have faith in this Baltimore team that they're going to get this one done. And Pittsburgh's going to come a little bit back down to earth. They've been on a good streak, but they've beaten some pretty poor teams here. Granted, I was more excited, a week and a half ago when I thought Lamar was going to be in there, and I had my eye on this game. But nonetheless, I think Tyler Huntley can get it done. He's solid enough. I have Tyler Huntley, anytime touchdown, plus 245. I know the Ravens activated J.K. Dobbins, but once again, it's basically, running back roulette there with the Ravens. I don't have any clue who's going to do what. But I know Huntley can get it done with his legs. Plus 245 for anytime touchdown for Tyler Huntley, and 2+ touchdowns at 18-1. Might not want to go after that one, but as the 2 touchdown odds continue to decrease week to week, you got to find the ones that still have a little bit of perceived value. And if Huntley can get them down around the goal line, he can, run it in there. So 18-1, I thought was pretty good value on that one. All right. Speaking of the Denver Broncos and the no offense, Kansas City Chiefs, Denver Broncos. Chiefs off a double road here at Cincinnati, now at Denver. Minus 8.5 was too rich for my blood. But I think I said this last week. I don't know what number will get me to take the Denver Broncos, but I know it's not 8.5 because I'm not 100% sure they can score 8.5 points. So what are you looking at in this one? I'm a no-go on this.
Yeah, this is another game that I had to dig deep here, and a lot of it, but I don't have a lot. So the picks that I was able to come up with are actually more of a gut feeling than anything. We talked about the Denver defense. This Denver defense is good. You saw what Cincinnati defense did to Kansas City last week. So, in my opinion, I think this Denver defense is probably a step above that Cincinnati defense. So, might cause fits, it might not, because we don't know which Kansas City team's going to show up here. But either way, I'll give you my 2 plays for this game. So, I've got the second half spread, Kansas City -4.5 at -110. I think that they're probably going to win this game, but it's probably going to happen in that second half, especially when that first half is probably going to be a really stingy defense. It'll probably tire out towards the second half is what I'm kind of assuming the game's going to go like. And that's when I'm taking Kansas City to win. So Kansas City -4.5 second half. And then my last one here, this is kind of a stretch. I just thought that it was the only one that I could really find value in. Latavius Murray, anytime touchdown at +150. That was the only touchdown score that I could find that had any value. So I probably wouldn't jump on it. I put a few bucks on it. I had a few extra bucks lying around that I was able to throw into this one. But, I'm not super confident in it. I do feel that if anybody has a shot on that Denver offense, it's probably going to be Murray.
So it's interesting here. I think we both are thinking the same thing. The play is probably to take that +8.5 versus with the Denver Broncos here, thinking this is going to be, 17-10. It's 2013.
I'll be honest with you. I was really torn. I think Kansas City's hasn't they're way better than this Denver team is.
Yeah.
But
you see it, they get backdoor covered in this all the time. The spread's probably 2 points at least too high. Maybe even 3. I think 4.5 would be the number.
I thought the second half spread at 4.5 was too big. But I mean, it's like I said, it's the most favorable one that I could find. I don't think that, listen, would I be shocked if Kansas City came out slinging and took a big lead in that first half? I would not. Because as I mentioned, they're head and shoulders a better team than Denver. But would I be shocked if this score, if this score goes to half by 3 points? That I also wouldn't be shocked. So I think that Kansas City's best shot at covering any spread for this game is probably going to be to wear this defense down early on that first half and then kind of let it go in that second half. That's my opinion. Obviously, we can't predict the future, but that's just kind of the way I see this game going.
Yeah. Oh, God. We're both on the same wavelength. Someone might talk themselves into a Denver Broncos +8.5 bet. That'll get the things flying as I'm watching this offense. All right. Let's move on to I don't really know what this game is. Tampa Bay Bucks versus San Francisco 49ers. I don't even know what you call the Tampa Bay Bucks. That's 2 games they've completely pulled out of their sphincter, though they have 0 right to win that game. I guess they can give their game checks to Dennis Allen because I don't know what the hell he was doing in that Monday Night Football game. It was not coaching. I will say that. San Francisco's got Brock Purdy in there. I can maintain that he would be okay enough, but I'm not seeing many points in this game. What do you make of this Tampa Bay San Francisco game here?
Well, I'll tell you, first off, I'll start off with Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay pulling off those wins, as you mentioned, in games that they probably had no business being in, but they managed to pull off the wins, and they're in the hunt, which is probably the most important thing for Tom Brady and the rest of those Buccaneer guys. But, you look at the San Francisco team, and I've talked to a bunch of Niner fans. My brother's a big 49er fan, and there's a few guys that I work with that are big Niner fans, so I've had conversations with all of them, and they all seem to think that they're going to be okay based off the way that last game went. And I've got something to tell you, okay? I'm one of those people that believes that defenses have a really hard time preparing for a quarterback that they didn't prepare for. In that game, they prepared for Jimmy Garoppolo and what Jimmy Garoppolo can do. And when he got banged up, it kind of threw things out of whack, I think, in my opinion. But I think that with at least, some game film that you can take back from last week, and the preparedness that the defensive coordinators can do, I think that he's not going to have as good of a week as he did. Now, can he win the game? Yeah, I still think he can win the game because of that defense. That defense is probably one of the best defenses in the league. If anything, I think that the smartest play in this game, and I'm not taking it. I have it here in parentheses as a maybe. I might see how things go in the early slate of games, and then maybe I'll jump on this one. But I think the only play in this game for me would be the under 37 points, because I just don't see how this Tampa Bay defense or offense scores points against this San Francisco 49ers defense. And this Tampa Bay defense, there are no pushovers either. They can show up every now and then. And if they show up, you're going up against a third-string quarterback, regardless of all the weapons the San Francisco offense has with, Debo and, their freaking two-way running back. And they've got a bunch of weapons. I get that. But the quarterback, third-string quarterback, I'm just not sold. I just can't buy it. So if anything, I think that the play for me would be hitting the under. And I know 39 is really low, but I just don't see how either of these offenses can put up a lot of points.
Yeah, you mentioned it. I'm on the under, and then I'm taking an alternate under 28 at plus 342.
Okay, sorry, I just had to. Okay, go ahead.
You mentioned it a little bit. No one's also mentioning that the Dolphins were driving down to take the lead in that game, and if Gesicki makes the freaking catch, the Niners might have lost that one. And then, you mentioned it, Tampa Bay's not going to be able to score on this San Francisco defense. I'm not sure how many points San Francisco will be able to get, but I think we've all watched Kyle Shanahan enough that if he's up 3 in the third quarter, he begins to try to run out the clock. So I'm not sure they're going to be all that aggressive in trying to roll up points here. So honestly, this thing could possibly be 7-3 for all I know. I'm on that under 28 plus 342. I think that's a pretty good number. And then the one thing I will do is San Francisco halftime, full-time bet is even money at plus 105. I don't like that 3.5. I talked about how Shanahan tends to, get a lead and then sit on that lead and just try to run out the clock. I think that's probably going to happen more than anything in this game. So I think that halftime, if anybody has watched Tampa Bay this year, they score 8 points in the first half per game. 8. That's including a handful of games like the one in Germany versus Seattle fixed in there. So I think San Francisco could definitely be leading at half. I'd look at the first half of that one as well. But I think San Francisco pulls this game out. So I thought halftime, full-time at plus 105 was a little bit better value than taking the 3.5 or just taking the out-and-out right money line and trying to win the game here. So I got under. You mentioned it, the 38.5 there. The alternate under at 28 plus 342 and halftime, full-time at plus 105. All right, let's move a little bit further north into this NFC West, and the Carolina Panthers versus the Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks got a win versus the Rams, but I must say this defense appears to be getting worse and worse by the week. Honestly, I thought John Wolford was going to make the Pro Bowl in that game.
And now you think Baker's going to make it.
And now I think Baker is. I don't really think that. But if you're turning Tutu Atwell into a elite receiver, I'm having some worries. Also, Cam Akers, who they were trying to trade and release for the first 10 weeks of the season, decided to go off as well. So Seattle's offense continues to look good, but this defense is worrying me a little bit. So I'm not quite bold enough to take the Carolina Panthers in this one. I got a parlay with them in it a little later, but I'm certainly thinking about it at plus 3.5. I'm curious where you're sitting on this game.
I think Seattle's a much better team. Now, I know that they've had their struggles on defense, but this is kind of what we expected coming into the season. I think what we didn't expect was the offense to be as proficient as they have been, which is one of the reasons why they've won as many games as they have. But you mentioned that defense seems to be getting a little bit worse, and it gives me a little bit of worry here. So that's one of the reasons why my plays for this game. I got second half Seattle at minus 0.5. So all they got to do is literally win that half by a point, and I'm making money here. Then I've got DK Metcalf anytime touchdown at plus 118. That Carolina defense, it leaves a lot to be desired here. I've got Tyler Lockett anytime touchdown at plus 118. And then I've got the only really weapon for Carolina, DJ Moore anytime touchdown at plus 205. I thought that was pretty decent value, especially considering the fact that, as we mentioned, the Seattle defense hasn't really shown much lately.
Yeah, I got a couple things in this one. DJ Moore, anytime touchdown, plus 220. The Seattle hasn't been able to get a pass rush, so I think Sam Darnold will be comfortable in this one. He's always been really, really good throwing to DJ Moore, so I got a lot of DJ Moore stuff. I got 2+ touchdowns for DJ Moore at 14-1, and I got 100+ receiving yards for DJ Moore at plus 648. In this one, I got a parlay also later that has DJ Moore and Deontay Foreman in it. No Carolina in this one, but I'm certainly looking at it. I think it'll play out a lot like the game last week versus the Rams, where Seattle probably comes out on top, but I think they're going to be trading scores here a lot because, I don't know if Seattle's defense can basically stop anybody at this point. All right, let's go to the night game in this one. Dolphins go to the Chargers. Dolphins 3.5-point favorites. This is one of the ones I really like. I got a couple plays on this one. I'm curious your thoughts on this game. I'm going big on the Dolphins in this one.
Yeah, listen, you know me. No one's a bigger defender than the Chargers on this Greenlightnetwork here than I am. But I just don't see how they can win against this Miami team. I think this Miami team's a lot better, but I do think that the Miami defense gives up the opportunity to the opposing offense to put up a lot of stats. So there's a lot of opportunity here for some good prop bets here. I'll give you some of the ones that I like here, and then we'll listen to yours, I guess. So I've got Jalen Waddle, anytime touchdown at plus 150. Out of all the receivers, I thought he probably offered the most value with the highest probability of actually getting in the end zone. I've got Tua over 1.5 passing touchdowns at minus 189. This one I'm a little bit timid about, so I wouldn't suggest it. I'm going to ride it because I've been riding it pretty much all season long. That's Austin Eckler over 92.5 rushing and receiving yards combined at minus 103. I don't think he's covered that one over the last 2 weeks. But again, I mentioned that this Miami defense does give up a lot of yardage and a lot of catches. And, it's their offense that's really kept them in games so far this season as opposed to previous seasons. And my last one here, I'm taking Miami first half at minus 2.
Yeah, I got a couple ones in this one. I'm going Miami Dolphins first half, minus 2.5. I'm going pretty big on that one. I'm going Miami Dolphins first half over 14 points as well. And then I got Miami Dolphins race to 30 at minus 120. So I got three things here. I'm not going to do the spread at minus 3.5. I think Dolphins really dominate in the first half. You've seen the Chargers get off to slow first half starts. They continue to be really, really not very aggressive at the start of games. And then, in that fourth quarter, ask Justin Herbert to start bailing them out. And then they start getting aggressive and throwing the ball. You've basically seen the opposite with the Miami Dolphins. They've started out real hot and then sort of powered down as the games, have gone on. So I think that can play out. So I'm really big on the first half over 14 points. I really, really like that one. That's at even money. Miami Dolphins minus 2.5, and then race to 30. I like the Miami Dolphins in that one. I looked at a couple of those player props. I agree. Waddle's probably the one you have to play because it's really hard to take Tyreek Hill stuff, anymore. Basically the Dolphins are a 2-receiver team, and then they run the ball with Mostert and Wilson. So it's hard to go outside of Waddle and Tyreek Hill and Waddle still presents a little bit of value, why Tyreek Hill's really, really hard to get value on. I might look at a little bit of the sort of rushing stats as well on both Wilson and Mostert. The Dolphins really, really pick on linebackers here who get out of position. The Chargers have some of the worst linebackers in football, and I think they can hit them in the run game. That being said, they can also hit him in the pass game with Waddle or Hill going over the middle and getting, in between the safeties and the linebackers in this one. So I like the Dolphins early in this one, and then maybe get an in-game play. Look at the Chargers to do their normal little late game try to make a comeback and just come up short. So that's what I like in that one. We'll finish out with a whimper. Honestly, I put something on, but anyone crazy enough to bet on this game or what team is coming out on either side has totally lost their mind. New England Patriots versus the Arizona Cardinals here. Cardinals are 1-point dogs. I got barely anything for this. Anything on this. I don't even know how to handicap because I don't know what's coming from either side, defensively or offensively.
Well, I'll tell you what, I just look at it really quick, and I've got a few plays here, but nothing I'm locking in right now. I'm going to see how this slate of games for Sunday goes on, and then we'll attack Monday when it shows up. But I'll tell you the ones that I like right now, just looking at it. Even though this feels like the type of game that Arizona would like to stick to you, where you think the Patriots are going to come out and win just how bad Arizona's been, and they come out and pull off this win here. But even then, I'm going to take New England here -1.5 at -110. I do have DeAndre Hopkins anytime touchdown at +125, and then I've got the under 43.5. I was hoping you could try and sell me on that under, but again, this is a Monday night game, so we're probably going to see how Sunday goes and then probably attack some of these Monday night bets.
Yeah, the only thing I got here is Hopkins 2+ +700. You could go under. Based on, one, New England doesn't score any points whatsoever.
Their defense is pretty good.
But I will say that the 3 times their offense has been good, it's been when they've been able to get, sort of dump balls to the running backs and match them up versus linebackers. Arizona's linebackers have a real hard time covering. So maybe the offense can move. But, everybody scouted that. You saw Mac Jones last week, demanding to throw the ball downfield. So I just don't know. There's no telling what you're getting from Arizona. It could be 40 points. It could be 3 points and 15 turnovers. So the under would probably be a safe play, but it's just, there's no telling what you're getting. This is such a wild card game that the only thing I remotely thought was, New England's corners haven't been great this year. Hopkins could get 2+ at 7-1. Might be all right. The only thing with that is Marquise Brown's probably coming back. And Kyler seemed to like to force the ball to him. So I don't know. All right, let's move on to parlays. I got a handful this time, so you won't trounce me in parlays. I'll go first. I'm going to go rushing yards. Mixon over 84.5, Chubb over 94.5 at 10-1. I really, really like this one. Cleveland Brown have been terrible against the run, so I think Mixon can hit that 84.5. And I guarantee you, if Cleveland's close in this game, it's going to be because Chubb runs the ball really, really well. I think that's really, really good value in this game. So Chubb over 94.5, Mixon over 84.5 at 10-1. I love that parlay. I did a 2+ touchdown parlay. Jamal Williams out of the Lions. He's been a red zone beast getting touchdown. He's going to be back healthy today. And then I just mentioned it, Joe Mixon on that one at 2+ touchdowns. That one was a 12-31, I believe, was the final number on that one. So almost 13-1 on 2+ touchdowns for Mixon and Williams. I mentioned the Carolina game, anytime touchdown and 100+ receiving yards for Deontay Foreman at +564. Not great value, but I think you can definitely get the touchdown there. I think it's more likely that, Foreman is more in the 80 to 90 yard rushing range, but I think he could get there at 564. Certainly from what we've seen from the Seattle defense. If you can make Cam Akers look good, you can make Deontay Foreman look good as well. So anytime touchdown, 100 plus rushing yards, Deontay Foreman plus 564. And then this one I like a little bit better. DJ Moore, 70 plus receiving yards, anytime touchdown. That's at 568, so almost 6-1 for a two-teamer on that one. And then I mentioned it, my Buffalo Bills trio of touchdowns. Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen, Gabriel Davis, all one touchdown, 16-1 this week. So it's getting a little bit better value as we go week to week. Basically, as the Bills have stopped scoring 30 points and just hover around the 24-point mark, which makes it very difficult to have three guys each individually score one touchdown. But Diggs, Allen, Davis, anytime touchdown, 1638. And lastly, my money line underdog parlay of the week. Carolina Panthers money line, Cleveland Browns money line, plus 650 on that one. So that's what I got in the parlay world. What are you looking at in the parlay world?
So I've got 3 same game parlays here for you, okay? And I'm going to start off with my first 2, and then I'll give you one that's a bit of a long shot. You could probably take a leg off and still make decent value on it. So my first one here is Minnesota and Detroit, same game parlay. I've got Cook and Williams, anytime touch, and a plus 282. Not great value. Both of those guys have a really high probability of getting in the end zone, so I like that one. My second one here, I've got Elliott and Pollard to both score a touchdown in the game at plus 245. Again, not great, but the probability of both of them getting in, especially the way they've been splitting carries, I think is pretty good. And my long shot here, this is just because I really like the probability of this game becoming a really high-scoring game. Minnesota and Detroit, Cook, Jefferson, Williams, and St. Brown, anytime touchdown scores at plus 1,500. Pretty good value there. Like I said, you could probably get rid of one of the legs there and still get pretty good value. And if this game turns out to be a high-scoring affair like a lot of us expect it to be, then there's a really good shot that you can hit a pretty big one there.
Yeah, definitely. I think those are pretty good value, I think, for sure. I think we're going to hit some parlays this week. So we'll see if we can hit some parlays. We'll, of course, be back next week. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our content. Me and the Dynamite will be back to preview the World Cup semifinals matchup. You don't want to miss any of our World Cup content.
You don't want to miss it.
Quarterfinals weekend. Plus, we'll go over our college football review, go back over some of our best picks, go back over some of our futures. I will say me and Achilles Reigns, Philadelphia Eagles futures are looking very, very nice right now. So that should be fun when we go over those. We got a little bit more time before those futures play out, but you don't want to miss any of this content. Back next week. Like, subscribe. That's our show, and we're out.